Hello really friends! Today I have a very special video for you. There's a question that I promised I would get to, and today I am finally going to be tackling that. What question is it? We're gonna be going over my 3 ways to add character to narration. But before I go anywhere, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer and remind you that the following is merely my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as another point of view in this issue, on this issue, about this issue. So how did this question come to be? One of my super long time followers, SquareAQ, sent me a question basically asking, "Hey Max, do you have any tips for how to differentiate character voices in narration, such as in stories with multiple points of view, and how do you make these characters sound different when they're narrating?" Now, of course, I absolutely understand where this question is coming from. It's a worry that a lot of people have when writing a story. You don't want your narrators to all feel the same, especially in stories with multiple points of view. So, I have 3 little pieces of advice for you. Before we get there, though, I have to address the elephant in the room. And this is mostly the elephant that I'm bringing in because this is something that I like to talk about when we're dealing with character issues. And one of them is that there's this pitfall in writing of looking at characters as though they're one thing, such as, how do I write a man? How do I write a woman? And I don't necessarily feel that this is the best way to go about doing things because nobody is just a man and nobody is just a woman or anything else in between around the entirety of the spectrum. People are a collection of multiple things. Thus, I believe that simply looking at what the character is or a part of their entire spectrum of personality is not the way to go about doing things. I think the best way to go about doing things is defining your character's voice, and I believe that voice is made of 3 elements: vocabulary, culture, and biases. Vocabulary is the first one and is the most straightforward. How does this character express their thoughts? How would they share a story? Do they use slang? Do they swear? Again, this is the most straightforward out of my 3 tips and 3 elements because it's really easy to see. And this is actually, ironically, this is what people see as character voice, how somebody expresses themselves, and I don't think that's the entirety of it. I think this is merely just the tip of the iceberg. Talking about the iceberg analogy, what lies beyond the iceberg? Number 2. Culture, culture, culture. As I've said a million times before, nobody exists in a vacuum, You're part of the culture of the world that you lived in, the time that you lived in, the people you were surrounded by. All of these things give you values and ideals and sets of personality traits that are inherent to you because you grew up in this culture. I think this is incredibly important because unless your character is the single remaining person in the entirety of the planet, they grew up with somebody else. And this person taught them values and ideals and lessons, and all these translate to this character's culture. And let us not forget that people are not just one thing as well, because cultures and subcultures all vary depending on where you're from, your nation, and your city and your neighborhood. All of these things color the way your character behaves and the way they go about viewing the world. But I think, above all, the most important question you can ask about your character's culture is, 1, what did this culture teach them? And 2, does this character embrace that culture or renounce it? Because you may notice sometimes that the culture that you live in is not exactly the one you want to live in. You want it to be better, to be different, to change an element that you disagree with. And that's incredibly complex. That adds so much complexity to character when a character acknowledges that they grew up in a place and they don't want to be in that place anymore. All good things to keep in mind. With that said, there's one last element, my 3rd element to character voice, and it is without a doubt my most favorite. What is it? Character biases. Because while vocabulary shows you the way a character expresses themselves, and culture shows you where they came from and the people they were surrounded by, biases show you the little hints of extra color to your character. Their upbringing, the things they love, the things they hate, the things they cannot stand, and the things they're willing to protect. I am talking about the little things that add that extra 10% character to your characters. Things like the character who's narrating reacts differently to people who have a particular character trait. Why do they do that, and how do they explain this reaction through narration? I know that some people may consider these to be kind of petty, and some may even go ahead and say that these don't belong in narration, but I disagree. I think these are the little things, the little hints of color that remind us that the character who's sharing this story with us is not an empty vessel. If I had to summarize all of my advice into one single thing, is that the whole point of adding voice and character to your narration is to fight against the idea that your character is an empty vessel, a third-person omniscient object that has no personality and no color and is merely there just to enable us to see the story. You want to fight against that. You want to show the reader with every tool you have got that this character speaks like a real person, has had an experience and a culture like a real person, and has biases like a real person. All of these things go such a long way to make the narrator feel less like a faceless character and like a three-dimensional real person who's got tastes and a history and a particular way to share their thoughts with the world. Now, once again, allow me to summarize my thoughts. I believe that there is a great way to define character voices so that in stories you're able to differentiate between different narrators, and that is by defining that character's voice, by looking at their vocabulary, how they express themselves, the culture, the place they grew up in and the people they knew, and their personal biases, the little extra 10% color that shows us their subjective things, the people they don't like, the people they like, and why. These little elements go a long way to make a character feel three-dimensional, like a real person sharing with you a story. I hope that helps. I actually really do hope that helps. Today's advice basically rings with my biggest advice for characters, which is treat characters like people. Real people are not one thing, you know? Real people are not a man or a woman or anything else within the rest of the spectrum. They are many things. They are the places they've been to, the people they've known, the people they've loved, the cities they've been to. I think that is a Jorge Luis Borges quote now that I think about it. I love me some Jorge Luis Borges. Regardless of that, you know, treating characters like people goes a long way because you give them the benefit of the doubt and you give them the space, you know? I did not make you, I found you, and you are this incredibly complex person, and going all the way with that can make narration feel so incredibly real. That is the difference between a third-person omniscient story and a memoir. Memoirs are dripping with characters because they're one person's point of view. With that said, I want to thank you for watching, like, subscribe to all the socially related things, and if you would like even more writing advice, positivity, and prompts, you can head over to my official writing blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com. Thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll be seeing you soon! Mwah! Welcome back to the outro, also known as the editorial, except there is no editorial today. I forgot to have this on the front of the video, so I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to make a whole video on this later, but I am actually going to be doing Camp NaNoWriMo, or NaNoWriMo, depending on how you like to pronounce it. It is kind of like NaNoWriMo in November, except it's in April, and you can set your own word count, or word goal. I'm going to be doing it, I'll do a whole video about it, but the people who are watching this right now, you get to go ahead and start leaving me questions. Leave any questions that you have regarding writing in the comments below, and I will be putting them on the queue for, you know, the questions that will be getting answered in the next week. I want to do a lot of, I don't want to say basic questions or writing 101 questions because, you know, writing is, there's no levels to writing, you know, like we're all like craftsmen in an art where nobody becomes master, you know, that's the way things are. So instead, you know, leave me the questions that, you know, you've been meaning to ask me forever. You know, those of you who actually stay until the end of the video, not everyone does, you know, go ahead and leave me questions, okay? Like, I'm gonna take this video as the first video where I'm gonna start gathering questions. So yeah, consider this a formal reminder that you should go leave me your questions. I don't know if I'm gonna be doing like the I don't even know what I called it. The segment that I did last November. I think I'm going to be doing something else. Of course, I'm going to have a full video on that. I'm going to ask you guys' opinions. But for the time being, go leave me some questions. And until the next time we meet again. Mwah!